And we're live.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Friday, which means it's time for another episode of the Guns and Mental Health podcast. And today I'm going to be joined by just one co-host, Kevin Berry. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm good. Just got back from Hawaii last week. That's why we didn't go live. I didn't maybe trust Mike to run the whole show
Did you
by
trust me to run
himself
the
without. We have trouble getting your headphones connected, let alone a live stream.
We've only been doing this for a few years, so it's one of those things, it's a slow growing process. But dude, Hawaiian shirt, I love it. Like that's awesome. I'm sure everyone was probably like, "Who's wearing a Hawaiian shirt? What's up?"
You get 1 week, and after you return from Hawaii, you can wear a Hawaiian shirt on the podcast. I think that's the rule.
Very true. Very true. Today we are going to talk about something that I don't think a lot of people in the firearms industry think about. And that is positive legislation for firearms, if there is such a thing in someone's mind, right? I think about the time when we did, I think we did a poll on Instagram, right? Is that where we put it? We were asking about positive legislation for firearms, or would you back it?
We put that in the survey too, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little informal, right? But the reason why I want to talk about it is because legislation has been a hot topic lately, especially with a state like Colorado, where some negative legislation towards gun owners has come down, kind of following suit of states like Washington, right? Where you're just seeing more and more restriction upon law-abiding firearms owners and a lot of feel-good legislation, stuff that doesn't even really make sense. It's not going to do anything to bring down the gun violence number, right? The number that's been lumped, this giant number where every negative outcome of firearms is lumped together. And I always equate that type of legislation. My line that I use over and over again when I speak to people is, if I told you that I could reduce the number of DUI deaths by banning red sports cars and things like that, what would you think of me? And every time that answer's the same. They go, that wouldn't do anything. I mean, it would reduce something, but it wouldn't even make a dent in it, right? And then I said, well, that's how I feel about some of the legislation that's passed by these politicians, that I'm not sure the gun neutral, or maybe sometimes even the pro-gun person who's not part of the 2A culture fully understands, right? Like that's what I'm getting at there. Sometimes I remember I had a friend one time come over, and basically he voted for the transfer law in Nevada. And he asked me after the fact, which was a little upsetting, but that's okay, right? But he's like, yeah, I voted yes for there to be a law where you can't just hand your gun to somebody. And I remember saying, well, what about in a time of crisis? Like, what if I'm not doing so well? And he's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And I said, yeah, of course, because you read the law being proposed in the most negative way possible. You read it as if Kevin was angry at his wife and got in an argument with somebody and the wife's brother, and Kevin came over to my house and said, give me a gun. Give me a gun. Like, that's how they read it. So there's times when I do understand that people can misunderstand the intentionality of those laws, but at the same time, they never think about the unintentional consequences. And I always value your opinion, because I look at you as somebody that came in to help us with marketing, had an understanding of firearms, but didn't really understand the culture. And as you've kind of been involved in this and watched us grow and helped us grow, you have to have some opinions on this stuff, especially when you see the back and forth and the banter on social media and places like that. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I just love bringing this conversation to the table, because even all of Walk the Talk's audience doesn't get the exposure that you get, because you go to the healthcare community and they might be talking about red flag laws, and the way they're explaining it to their audience is the most perfect way you could ever do a red flag law, when maybe there is somebody that has legitimate intentions of harm and something like that, and that's how they're presenting it to their audience. And then you're also on a panel and you're like, well, that's one way, but that's in the best light you could ever shine it. What about this? And maybe causing hesitations to seek mental health with some distress and stuff like that. And then that builds up. And then just seeing people react to your thoughts and being like, oh, I didn't think about that. So you're able to talk to people and give ideas and solutions to both sides of kind of the line of and neutral that they didn't think about, and it brings a nuance to the conversation that wasn't there before you entered the room. So I thought this was a great topic to tackle, because yeah, the healthcare community maybe isn't always anti-gun, but they don't always understand things the way you do.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to be able to provide alternative solutions to some of this stuff, right? So like I get that part. It's not that I have this ability to just walk in a room and be able to tell somebody another side of it. There's a lot of prep to it. There's a lot of, okay, I'm going to walk you this way, show you some solutions that we're putting forward, get you to be invested or like what we're up to, and then I'm going to make you think about some things because I got your guard down, right? Like that's the way it always goes. I think for many years, many of us in the firearms industry have always had trouble conveying those messages because, once again, most people just kind of default to, well, something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. And they don't really know what that something is. They just want something to be done, right? So it's easy for them to get frustrated when we're saying, well, there's a problem. Yeah, we know there's a problem, but we don't know how to fix it, or we don't even know how to join in to fix it. And I think like Walk the Talk America and some of these other programs out there like Hold My Guns and the work that Derek LeBlanc and Devin Perkins do with Kids Safe and Kids to Kings show these little avenues, these alternative avenues of educating and helping and solving issues. So then it's easier to say like, okay, well, you know, this is a problem with this feel-good legislation that you think is helping. It's not going to save lives. And once again, this goes back to what I said many times in the past, that if you lump gun violence together in one big number and just show that horrible number, whether it's 45,000, 50,000 people a year, but you don't explain to somebody the different categories of that number, right? Suicide is not the same as gang violence or inner city violence. And it's not fair to act like there's one approach that covers all those bases, because there isn't, and we know that. But it's one of the frustrating things about the situation, and one of the things I kind of want to dive into is there is positive legislation out there, right? Why don't we ever advertise that? Like, that's been very frustrating too, right? You would think that there would be articles written about what's going on in Louisiana and our work with TAPS and the Armory Project. That's what TAPS stands for, and the VA out there. But you don't even hear about that from our side. Like, our outlets aren't even writing about that. And question is it because it's legislation and we consider all legislation bad, or is this, once again, are we doing a horrible job of kind of beating our chest at the positive things we do? I don't know.
It's almost like when I'm talking to business owners, they're hesitant about social media, of all the negative things that could happen by being on social media. The gun industry almost like holds back and focus so much on the defense and defending the kind of obvious anti-gun legislation that they don't really pose solutions. And it frustrates me as a marketer because I see the other side where the healthcare community, I know we look at the ad budgets on Facebook and different stuff, not even the healthcare, the anti-gun maybe organizations, and they have $10, $15, $20,000 a month they're spending on their messaging. And I know just this morning I sent you a text of excited what we were able to accomplish with the $8.66 because we don't have that kind of ad budget to get the solutions. And it frustrates me because I know being around you and hearing all your logical arguments and being able to talk to friends and family members that only hear the anti side, they're like, oh, that makes sense. So it frustrates me that we don't get those solutions and those ideas out there. And I don't know if it's we're missing a trusted spokesperson to kind of unite around, or what the big hang up is from the whole. But I hope it changes.
Yeah, and for those that are listening right now that are probably like, what is he talking about in Louisiana? I just want to touch on one example of what I consider positive legislation that moved through. And we recently had Galatru and Caleb Morse on the show, who are the people behind the bill that got passed in Louisiana. And the Armory Project, what the Armory Project is it's a conglomerate of gun shops and people that work in the VA. And what they wanted to do is create safe storage spaces, similar to what Hold My Guns does, right? For everyone listening that knows what Hold My Guns does. But they just do it in the state of Louisiana. So it's more targeted. And basically what they try to do, and there's a lot of overlap with what Walk the Talk America does, is they go in, they get a shop to get excited about potentially offering safe storage to those who are in crisis when they need it, no questions asked. But then they also ask the gun shop to be more involved in presenting a mental health plan or suicide prevention plan, and being able to provide resources. And that's why they gravitated towards us, because they love what we're already doing. They love the firearms training course, and there's a lot of synergy there that we could work together on things. And I'm excited about where this is going to go in the future. I really am, because we need, and this is maybe for another part of this show, but when you do this work, sometimes you do get burned out, and sometimes it looks like you're looking at a tsunami. So when you find like-minded people that are doing the same thing that you just vibe with, it helps. It gives you a shot in the arm. They've given me a shot in the arm. I've given them a shot in the arm. It's obvious the way that when we have meetings and everything like that, but it's great. But one of the reasons why I was always a huge fan of Gala and her group, this is way before we worked together, right? This is when we were just running in the same room. One of the biggest barriers of entry for gun shops to get involved in holding people's guns was the fear of being sued if you give your guns, if they were to give their guns back too soon. So they were looking at us like, how do we none of us know how to write a bill. None of us know what even to do. So they did some research, they figured it out, and they got a bill passed fairly quickly. And when she tells the story in the podcast, which I'm going to encourage everyone to go back and listen to if you're listening to this now, they said it was almost like too easy for them. Like they couldn't believe how easy it was and how much it was accepted by both sides of the aisle, where, the gun shop will not be held liable if they return firearms too soon. You return the guns back to the rightful owner. The owner does something horrific, or maybe wasn't out of that crisis, and now they can't be held liable. And that just makes sense to me, right? Like that just makes perfect sense, because you want to encourage people to get involved in the conversation and actually provide the resources, but you don't want to discourage them by creating barriers to entry, because they have to worry about their livelihood if they tried to do the right thing and it didn't work out. Reminds me of when I was little, like people telling me, don't give CPR to strangers because if something bad happens to them, they can sue you, right? And like, you're like, okay, I'm not helping. I'm just going to blow by people, right? And that's what they do. I thought that was very forward thinking. And in my opinion, that's the type of legislation we should be beating our chests about and being happy about. And because A, not only is it the right thing to do, but B, I think it gives us some hope, because as the firearms community, sometimes we feel that we are like wounded ducks, that nobody's listening to us, and we don't get a lot of we do get a lot of wins, right? We do. We've seen constitutional carry get passed in many states. Those are great things, but sometimes we feel like we don't get any positive feedback from anybody, and that's a bill that passed and flew forward, and now it's going to continue to let us really get some really good work done and save some lives and encourage people to think about, safe storage and think about mental health. And I think it's just great. And then on the flip side of that, like you said, you had the Colorado thing, but I don't know, what are your thoughts? What do you, when you heard about Gala and that group, what did you think?
I just want to drop a note. There's some confusion in the live stream chat. This episode with Gala and Caleb will come out next week if you're listening to the live stream. If you're listening to the actual podcast, it will be behind in the episodes. I was out on vacation and didn't trust Mike to run the live stream solo, so that's why
Which is very smart. Very smart.
last week's episode was not on the live. I just don't understand it, because we also heard in Colorado, I forget, it might have been poorly written, but it was almost like not maybe positive gun legislation, but maybe punishing people for stealing a firearm and then committing something. I didn't see the full details. It didn't look like it got very far. So you have something like that could make sense for both sides to try to communicate and find some middle ground with. And then you have Louisiana, which makes sense for both sides, and that passes so smoothly, and Denver doesn't even get very far. So I guess that part confuses me, but Louisiana, I think it's great. Like you say, all we hear about is, oh, this bad thing's coming for legislation for gun owners, and the Louisiana kind of bill makes it, oh, gun owners are in mind. This is something that's needed, and they're thought of.
Yeah, and I want to encourage anyone who's in the chat right now. What are some positive legislation that you might have in your head, right? What do you think? Like, I'm going to throw out one that I think would be brilliant, is to get the government to pay for education, firearms education, right? Like we looked, I think you sent me an article yesterday about Tennessee trying to get firearms education passed in schools. I think that's brilliant. Right. As firearms fans, as firearms owners, we're always saying, get educated about firearms and start at a young age. Right. And I think about, what would it look like if the government helped and stepped in and made firearms education a priority for the youth, to drastically reduce the accidental deaths that happen. Right? Because I'm going to tell a story that I rarely tell publicly, but I was one of those people when I was young that I found a gun. I came across a gun that wasn't secured properly. I was at a friend's house, and he showed me his father's gun. And I remember just kind of like backing up, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he's like, look at this. And he took the magazine out, and we knew nothing about one in the chamber. And I remember he pointed at his dad's bed and he goes, do you think this is still loaded? And I go, dude, give me that. I don't know. And I took the gun from him. I said, let's go to the backyard. All right. And he lived in one of those neighborhoods where there's no fences around the backyard. There's construction workers on the other side of the street. And I remember, like, I pointed the gun into the ground and I pulled the trigger and it went off. And we didn't realize, like, even, we'd only seen like that type of scenario in movies, right? Like, it doesn't seem as loud, man. And I remember, like, everybody, even the construction workers across the street, were like, what? Like, what just happened? That was a gunshot. And thankfully, like, for my friend and I, we were able to bury that, because we shot in the backyard. If we would have shot through his bed, there's no hiding it. But it's kind of ironic when you think about, like, my work now in firearms and how how much I beat the whole, like, do not, I know you think you trust your kids, do not. Like, you could tell them all you want about firearms, you could teach them all you want about firearms, but all it takes is one person to do something silly. But, like, to me, I would have loved to have that education to have been able to correct my friend, and vice versa. Wouldn't have been great if he had that education to correct me. But I would have loved to be able to say, dude, that is still loaded. Like, there's one in the chamber. Understand mechanically. I think that empowers kids, right? Because there's nothing cooler than, say, a young Kevin Dixie, right? I was watching Kevin Dixie talk to these children through the Kids to Kings program the other day. He had these kids, and man, did he make it look cool to be a responsible gun owner. He really did. And the things that he was doing. And for those of you who didn't see this, go to our Instagram page, go to Facebook, like, check out these videos of him talking to these young men. It got me so excited because I thought, man, these kids now are going to be empowered to be responsible. I mean, the way he even like separated people in the street being irresponsible with firearms and equating it to oppression, right? Like, this could get you thrown in prison for the rest of your life, or this can empower you. I think that's beautiful. And what I would love to see more of is a bunch of kids that are coming through programs like Kids Safe and Kids to Kings, having a general understanding of firearms knowledge, which is very important. And Derek, like, if Derek was on here right now, he'd be telling you all kinds of anecdotal stories that are just super powerful about, kids that were like me at that young age, elementary school, finding a firearm because somebody left it out, and really not knowing what to do, not knowing about one in the chamber. And that's really what's going to get you shot. So you should have that general knowledge, so that's some positive legislation that I would love to see.
Yeah, I unfortunately know kind of the negative outcome of that story. My wife's grandparents knew somebody in their neighborhood where their kid found a firearm and was with a friend, and unfortunately, forget if the friend or the kid of the family died because they shot it off. But that's what happened. But yeah, it'd be great. I was with you guys in Oregon when Derek was kind of the guest presenter when we were training mental health clinicians, and he went through all of those basics, and even the clinicians really valued that insights of better understanding firearms. I saw Jake made a good point on the Tennessee legislation that he didn't love that there was a no opt out for parents. I thought that was a good point, as parents should probably always be able to consent and opt out of things they don't believe in. Not that I would love Derek to train every child in America on firearm safety, but I did see that point and wanted to echo that as, yeah, maybe we all agree with this, but some other legislation that we don't agree with is kind of shoved down our throats. But yeah, it needs to get echoed. We see all the negatives, and working in marketing, I know that works because it triggers emotions, and that's what gets clicks and makes money. But it would be great if the same energy got behind promoting, like Kevin Dixie, making responsible gun ownership look cool instead of all like Kids to Kings. And he talked about all the rap videos or different videos that kind of make irresponsible gun ownership look cool. Get that same energy behind KD and all these other messages.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I've talked to Devin Perkins from Kids to Kings about this. If you don't teach your kids, then they are going to learn from videos. They're going to learn from movies, and I'm a perfect example of that as well, right? Like, the first time I shot a firearm in a legit way, not being an idiot as a kid, finding when we found my friend's dad's gun, I faked my way through it because I was already out on a range, and I was out there shooting with some of the bigger companies in the industry, right? There was a rep from Smith & Wesson, there was a rep from High Point, and like, we're all going up to the line and demonstrating our firearms, and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So I just copied, like, I was watching them. Okay, like, that's how he's holding it. I'm like, dude, but that was horrible. It was a horrible way to do it. Something that's very interesting point, I think about a lot, because usually when I'm talking to an anti-gun person or a person who's gun neutral, and I notice they do this a lot too after a shooting, after a mass shooting, they always say, like, yeah, they should require gun safety classes for everyone, right? And to Jake's point, we're all about freedom at Walk Talk America. We don't believe in mandates, period. Like, we don't. Like, everything should be voluntary. If you want it, it should be available, the resources. So let me make that very clear for everybody listening. And I'm glad Jake pointed that out, right? Because that we're all about freedom. We're all about choice. But I go back to, like, I use my mother as an example. After every mass shooting, she always says, well, they should require training. They should require training. And it's always funny because I'm always thinking in my head, like, kid was a mass shooter, right? Like, he went and did something evil. What would the training have done? Made him more proficient, right? Like, but then I think about it, and I think about, well, maybe if that kid did get in front of Kevin Dixie when he was younger, maybe she's got a point there. Like, maybe what she's saying, but she's not saying it the right way, is, you can teach gun safety. You can have these courses. You can incorporate things that might make this person a little bit more mentally stable and healthy as a gun owner. And maybe you change the course of their life. I'm going to give another example of my childhood. This is going to sound goofy, but it's real. It's stuck with me. I remember I had a friend who was a little older than me, and me and my friends used to look up. He was a cool kid. He was just such a cool kid. Like, he was a good athlete. He was funny. And we always hung out together. He let us play football. He let us do all this stuff with the older kids. And I remember I wanted to impress him, because I'm going through my age where I'm a rebel. And I had gotten some cigarettes, and I was smoking a cigarette. And literally, I'm like, Eddie came over, and he was just like, man, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, we don't do that stuff, man. Come on. And that didn't work the way I thought it was going to work. And I never smoked a cigarette again. Like, just that one thing. Like, I had one positive influence, literally, like, and I'm going to draw back to Kevin Dixie with those kids. Like, that's all it takes. Sometimes all it takes is one person to say something, and that stays with you forever. You know what I mean? And honestly, like, I don't know if I would have ended up a smoker, right? Like, I didn't know if I was really into that, but all it took was one positive role model just to be like, nah, man, like, don't do that. That's stupid. And it changed my life. So having said that, maybe if you could get people to come through courses, right? And courses are expensive, right? Everybody's good. There's a cost in everything. There's time, there's materials, there's people's just regular time, right? Like, just, but if you made it available and people could tap into that, because we all know that buying guns is expensive already, right? Because you're looking at minimum $300, $400 before you're walking out there, and not everybody has that. But if you had those courses, and you had legislation that provided that stuff to you, if you wanted to take advantage of it, once again, not a mandate, but if you wanted to take advantage of it, I think that would be great.
Yeah, you could almost go the same way with the Louisiana stuff. Maybe a parent seeing their kid in a dark place and knows that they have access to a firearm and can't afford a safe or something like that, making it easier for them to take it to a range to temporarily store it to get it out of the house would also be a potential preventative measure of some of those horrific actions. Brandon put in the chat one about positive gun legislation. He would love to see people get a percentage of a gun safe or lockbox back with the purchase of a firearm. And I know you've talked about this. We put in our survey, and maybe people are not in agreement of how it's funded, but it seems like majority of the people are positive towards the idea of allowing people that maybe can't afford it make those responsible storage devices more affordable.
Yeah, I want to share a story. So many of the listeners that have been following us know the name Russell Lemley. Russell Lemley and I have worked together since the White House in 2019. We were both on the Prevents team. That's where we met. when I went into that room at the White House, and there were some of the most brilliant minds in research and people like Emmy Betts, and you know, it's funny because now I've developed relationships with them, and I consider some of these people, well, most of these people, friends. But there is that professional courtesy that we all have when we see each other at events. Some of these people are anti-gun, you can tell, but they're still working towards solutions, right? And they're not all negative. And I wouldn't say they're anti-gun; they just don't like guns, right? Nobody there wants to see people die, right? I always say that, right? Some of these people are pro-gun, right? There are people that love firearms there. When I was there, I realized I was the only person from the firearms industry in the room, right? Out of the 40 people that they invited to solve suicide for the VA in 2 days, you know, it just seems like this impossible task. But I remember when Russell was speaking. And when you look at Russell, you know, you look at that man, you feel his intelligence. Like, you know, he's been around a while. He'd been working with the VA, and I could tell by the way he was talking, he had a passion for people staying alive. And at that time, I didn't know if he was pro or anti-gun. I didn't know, or gun neutral. And I remember he was up there talking about the federal government needs to supply gun shops, pay for it, help them build their spaces, pay for lockers, right? And I remember, like, I was like, wait, what? What did you just say? Like, that, I never thought about that, right? And I remember after, because I was the only gun guy in the room, like, Russell approached me. He's like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I'm like, yeah. And he's just like, when I was up there talking about the locker thing, and I was trying to read your face, he's like, were you for that or against that? I couldn't tell. And I said, no, I'm absolutely for it. And he was like, oh, okay. I couldn't tell, you know, because he's like, sometimes I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And we started talking about the pros and the cons, right? And I told him, I said, one of the biggest, you know, cons to this thing, one of the negative things is you're going to have a lot of people that are going to say, like, I would never store my firearm in a locker that the government provided, right? And I followed that up with saying, having said that, there are a ton of people that would. There are a ton of people that wouldn't care. Like, they would just think about in that moment. So I think that it's good to offer it or have that get done. Now, in my head, I'm like, the United States government's never going to fund it. Like, I think Russell dreams real big with that. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, it was one of the first times where I saw somebody working towards a solution that wasn't like, no, we take it away from you, you know? And Russell still to this day believes that the United States government should pay for safes. Like, he believes that. Like, he, you know, and I know a lot of people right now listening are going to say, well, no, I don't want my tax paying money going to that. And, but once again, I think it has to be recognized that that is something positive that he's trying to do. He's not talking about red flag laws. He's not talking about restriction. And we've had numerous conversations since the day we met about the unintentional consequences of some of these laws. And I'm not even positive like Russell likes guns either. We don't talk about it, but he totally gets what we do. He totally gets what NSSF does. And he hates it when he sees people on his side talk about, we need to implement harsher red flag laws. We need to do this. We need to do that. So, you know, there are a group of people out there that are working towards things that are positive. And I want to say, like, that is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to be part of the conversation. So we can look for the pitfalls. We can shoot holes in things. We can give our advice about it. But if we refuse to talk to anybody over there that's working towards something just because they might walk into the room that day with full support of red flag laws, that we are doing ourselves a disservice by not sitting down with them and having the conversation and letting them know where we stand and saying, well, what if we diverted your energy that you have for red flag laws into something else that's positive? And when you do that, trust me, you weed out real fast who's about saving lives and who's about being anti-gun. You really do. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I know I've sat in on meetings to where we're kind of the consultants of, hey, we have this big marketing program or whatever we're rolling out, and we're like, okay, this bad. Oh, you put a ton of energy into cable locks. Not many people actually use those, so all your effort there might be wasted. What if you divert it to there? It's interesting to kind of see all those people react. And I mean, what, 2018, 2019, before I really got working behind the scenes with the organization, I'd probably be in the same kind of seat as the marketing people, kind of being creative around firearms, but not really knowing and fully understanding things. And now you and I are just like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's brilliant, but let's make some tweaks. And then you're right. We'd see if they actually take the advice and make the tweaks, or if they just kind of wanted to check the box off and have us our name there, but didn't really have the energy behind it.
yeah, it's always fascinating to me to see a room and when people brag about what they do, which is fine. Like I think everybody's proud of what they do. Like all their organizations, Walk Talk America's my baby, you know, Hold My Guns is Sarah's baby, NSSF Child Safe, they love that, right? But it's always fascinating to me to watch, to see like who is impressed by the cable lock thing, right? Because you know, NSSF's up there talking about how many locks Child Safe has provided. And, you know, you can see some researchers in there, people that work in mental health and suicide prevention, just like, yeah, you know. And I remember one time I was sitting there with the guys from Ruger and Smith and Wesson, we're all at the table, and they're like, we distributed X amount of locks. And I remember like, we all kind of jokingly went, and they all went into the trash. Right. But hey, look, I'm sure people use them, right? And once again, when we talk about gun owners, we sometimes, especially when we are the staunch 2A crowd, like the probably from my cold dead hands crowd, like we are, right? Like most of the people listening to the show are. Sometimes I think we forget that gun owners come in all shapes and sizes and have different attitudes, right? When I ran Eagle Imports, I had to understand that not everybody had this insane passion for the Second Amendment that we do. And you kind of have to have your marketing appeal to everybody, because there's so many gun owners. If I was a small organization at Eagle Imports and I sold 60 to 80,000 guns, do you think I had 60 to 80,000 like probably from my cold dead hands Second Amendment supporters? No, absolutely not. You know what I mean? I would say maybe it's 1 out of 10 is like that fully understands the importance of the Second Amendment. Now, not to say that people can't get there, right? Like they can get there. I got there. But at the same time, there are probably a lot of people that do use that cable lock. But once again, we want the most effective way to keep firearms safe, right? Like we want people to think about that. We want people to go beyond like, oh, you think you have this cable lock, knowing damn well that if someone breaks in their house, you might as well have not had that gun in the first place. You might as well have had a big can of bear spray or something like that, right? Like you need, there are definitely better ways to store a firearm. Now, not to say a cable lock isn't great if maybe you just want to lock it up when you got, your grandkids coming over for a party, right? There's a lot of ways as a lawyer I could argue like the positive stuff of this. And I don't want to crap on cable locks. I don't. Like I appreciate people that want to help. But there are way more effective ways. There's way more effective legislation. And like G-Web said, right, on a state level, like looking on a state level, like positive legislation makes a lot more sense. Not a federal level, but a state level. But it'd be also interesting to hear G-Webs, and if you want to chime in, I would love to hear what you think about the thought process of the federal government supplying gun shops with money for space and locker and storage, right? Like, I think I know what you'll say, but like I said, anyone who wants to chime in and give their opinion on that, I'm always fascinated by that, because we had some really cool people, some really great people when we did the survey, and they were like, absolutely not. right? Absolutely not. I do not want the federal government paying for storage lockers, and that's not where I want my money going. That's and I get that part, but it is, once again, we got to encourage people to try to think out of the box when it comes to solving this gun violence issue. And if we crap on everything and we don't have a nuanced conversation about everything, then it goes back to the whole, like, well, these people don't want to listen anyways. Like, doesn't matter what they say. They're going to move the goalpost. What else? What other legislation can we think of? What else do you think is positive?
I'm trying to pull. I think clinicians understanding firearms is a big one. There's mandated in ethics and different areas that they have to get continuing education in. With the amount of suicides, firearms seems like a no-brainer to put that in the category. And hopefully it's not just a bunch of healthcare organizations that look out to put out a firearm as education thing that don't fully understand it, because that's where money shifts, but actually go in and understand. Like I said, when we were in Oregon and we had the most anti-gun person, we found out after, holding the AR and being the most active participant with Derek, doing chilling, going through the demonstration and saying, okay, is this gun loaded? Is it not? And doing various kind of different things of having one in the chamber, but then taking the magazine out. Is it loaded? Then by the end of the class, they're able to say yes. Stuff like that is valuable for them to understand. That way, if the firearm topic gets brought up in their office, it's not kind of a nervousness and may result in a poor experience. Because if some gun owner comes in wanting a little mental health help, and then that clinician doesn't really handle that well, even if it's just a little off-putting and not the best and awkward, maybe that gun owner is like, ooh, mental health isn't right for me. And then they don't continue to get help when they were needing it.
Yeah, you talked about something that I want the listening audience to know. When we had that course and we did that thing in Oregon, right? And I would say that was really positive. Like, that was the clinicians there were really excited to be there and really had a vested interest in participating and asking questions. And there were some gun people in that room. That lady that you're talking about, the one that everyone was like, she's the most anti-gun in the room, and she's holding an AR, right? And she dove in. A lot of people don't know this that were in that room, but I've worked with her later. She contacted me one time and she was like, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in Oregon and I was a white-haired lady that, I had never touched an AR before. And she's like, I just want you to know, like, I go shooting now. So, like, that was a perfect example of somebody who was anti-gun, and everyone kind of bet that she would be the most angry in the room or like not listening. And she got she got bit. she now is going to the range regularly. She understands the way we think, and she calls everyone now and then or checks in with me and tells me about what she's doing and what my thoughts are on it. So that's a success story, and I think one of the coolest ones, because that was exciting. You know what I mean? Even Derek was like, "Wow, I can't believe she's up here holding the gun." And at that moment, we dispelled the myth of the evil AR-15, and now she's out shooting on ranges. Like, that's fantastic. That's exactly what we want. No pressure. Come into our world, understand it, and it doesn't hurt that we have the right messengers, right? Like, Jake, you were there, Derek was there, I was there, like, making people feel like it's okay. Like, I tell all my goofy stories about, how nervous I was, faking my way through the first time shooting. I may even share my negligent gunshot in the backyard story, right? Like, things like that, I think, help people understand, like, this is an intimidating process. I want to feel comfortable. I don't want people to look at me in a weird way if I ask a stupid question or a silly question. I shouldn't say stupid, right? But I want to be able to ask the same question over and over again. I want to feel comfortable with the person that gave me an answer. I didn't really understand their answer, so I want to be able to contact that person after, and knowing that they'll be patient enough with me, right? These are all things that are important when talking to people that are either gun neutral, gun ignorant, or anti-gun. You have to provide that to them. You have to give them that opportunity. So I love that you brought that up, so I could kind of jump up there and talk about that, because that always sticks with me, right? Going back to, she wasn't mandated to be there. That was her choice, but she could have chosen to not have a good attitude about it, right? She went in there.
She volunteered to stand up.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't, here, let's pass around this AR. It's, hey, would anybody in this class want to hold the AR and see how to properly hold it? And she jumped up. And yeah, it was after everybody spoke, and there was kind of some confidence built in it, but that was great. And for everybody that sees you and thinks, oh, there's no way he does it so well, Mike's amazing. I remember your first digital PowerPoint in 2020 where you had the same slide on because you were so nervous speaking for the first time on the healthcare, and we all know technology isn't your thing. He had the same slide on his PowerPoint when he was done presenting, and I had to text him, switch the PowerPoint show off, let people see your face. And it didn't just magically happen. Mike's done a ton of work at this, and
Batting practice.
That's why we didn't let you run the live stream solo last week.
Exactly. I know my role. No, it's true though. Not everybody's equipped, and that lady wasn't. I don't think she walked into that class that day, and at the beginning of the class was like, "Hey, I'm gonna hold an AR and I'm gonna shoot an AR." Or we didn't shoot that day, but like, I think that she got comfortable with us, and then was like, "Okay, I'm gonna step out of my comfort zone." I think that was a decision made there. It would be interesting to hear her thoughts. Maybe next time if I talk to her, I'll ask her. G-Webs brings up another great one. This is one we've kicked around. Tax breaks for shops and ranges that offer that option, right? I'm a big believer in that. When you go and get insurance for your home, they ask you questions about your home. And if you answer those questions, for example, like, do you have a pool? Does it have a gate? If you have a gate around the pool, you get a tax break, right? Like, or you get an insurance break. You get a discount on your insurance. So I'm all for incentivizing businesses, especially businesses. It's expensive to have a business, like Jake will tell you. Everybody that's owned a business knows. Breaks for people that are doing the right thing. Like, I see no reason, if you're a gun shop and you can demonstrate that you are invested in better mental health for your customers and suicide prevention, and you provide resources, whether how you do that, that's whether you put like the WTTA flyer in every, we have some gun shops that tell me that they put it in every bag, right? Every purchase comes with that flyer. Then we have other gun shops that say, hey, we just leave it there and we let people make their decision, right? When they're waiting for their background check to come back, you see people pick it up, they'll put it in their purse, they'll put it in their backpack, they'll put it in their pocket, and then you'll see people blow right by it, right? We're good with that. But I think you deserve a tax credit, a break, or some sort of break on your insurance if you're providing that and you demonstrate that you do that and you're invested. I think that makes complete sense. Incentivize people to do something positive for gun owners and their customers. You should want to do it anyways, but seriously, like, there are a lot of people that would respond to, hey, we can save some money by offering what's right to our customers, and our customers will probably appreciate it. So that's a great one, G-Webs.
Yeah, and just that flyer alone, I know we're a little behind on the data that we're getting from our screening tool, but I think it was 2022 was the last one. It's 3 people a day take our screening, and that's the only data we have. And maybe it would help us financially if we were able to give some follow-up and tracing, but we don't want that for reasons. But we don't know how many people have been positively impacted from that flyer and that resource just being out there.
Yeah. That goes back to the whole data conversation though too. It's right. Like unless you're measuring that and you're following up and you're kind of intruding on people's privacy, in my opinion, you're never really going to know what that helps. And I always say, data, don't let data get in the way of saving a life, and that's a perfect example of it. But G-Web's another great point. Firing pins, right? That takes some knowledge, right? So you have to create something that, you know, I remember the first time I tried to learn about taking out firing pins, and different firearms have different, like the way they're built. You know, sometimes it's a little trickier. Some are a little trickier to get the firing pin out than others, right? Like a Grand Power is a little different than, say, a Bursa for me. But yeah, I like that idea too, right? Anything that could educate somebody that has a little knowledge of firearms that could get the firing pin out. I think that's a good one. In the past, Jake and I have always brought that up in all the events that we've talked about, especially for the clinicians. We talk about, if you have the ability to take someone's firing pins out, take them out, because it's a perfect way to leave their property with them, but make the gun ineffective, right, for that moment. So I love that one too. As far as legislation for that, right, like I would love to see the, you know, once again, like money be set aside. All these things like can be taught, right? But you got to pay people to teach them, and you got to pay for materials. And I just don't think a lot of people are going to come out of pocket to do that. So, you know, why not? It's something that I can see on a state level, especially, you know, on a state level, I'd love to see states set aside money to basically pool all the resources that people can go to. Because I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to mental health help is not everyone is sure where to go. And there's levels, right? Like there's Mike at stage 4, there's Mike at stage 1. Mike at stage 1 might be like, I kind of want to talk to somebody, but I don't really know who to talk to. But this is not a 911. I'm in no, you know, there's no possibility of me hurting myself or others. Like I just need to talk to somebody eventually, right? That's kind of like me when with my utility bills, they sit on the counter and eventually I get to them, but it gets done, right? But I know where to do that. I feel like a lot of people don't understand what's available to them and where. So I would love to see basically something that kind of provided information like, hey, if you need to see someone immediately, this is who you could contact on a state level, right? And that's what we did with the Nevada. I know for the state of Nevada, you designed a card for us. It's our WTTA mental health flyer. And on the back, we had specific places that we thought really made sense for gun owners, to kind of take some of the guesswork out, because we do receive emails and we do receive calls from people that say, this is where my friend is at, or this is where my brother is at. And sometimes this is where I'm at. Where do I go? Where do I start? Right. So I would love to see more money thrown at, you know, when you move into a new house, what's the first thing the real estate agent gives you? It's usually a piece of paper that has like utilities, like this is your trash, this is it, right? It's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, this is who I call to get all these things turned on. And I feel like we could do that with firearms, right? We can do a firearm centric kind of, you know, sheet of information, or at least a resource, whether it's a website that's maintained that helps people get those answers and also helps them, you know, like keep their dignity, make it private, you know, because not everybody even wants to make that call to ask that question. So it's like, make it easy on people. Let's make it as easy as possible for people to find resources and people to get help, and letting them still be themselves. You know, that I love that. You know, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I know that's one of your visions with the directory. I know we've faced challenges getting the kind of directory out there to grow it, but you want a representative in every state for mental health to be able to at least send somebody, hey, check in with this person, and they'll be able to how to better direct you to get help in your area. Um, Something like that would be great. But again, like you say, it needs resources to get out and get what it could be. As we try, but we're still getting out there. And I want to circle back a little. You made up a good point of so many times I feel like everybody just talks to their own crowd because that's easy and that's easy to gain popularity, but the the progress is made in the middle, like that woman in Oregon that's now an advocate for guns, and shooting went from a complete flip. It always drives me crazy with politics that each side just kind of talks through their own side to get all the attention and a lot of energy, but it doesn't seem like anything really gets done because the people in the middle are kind of like found without a place. Educate those people on our kind of perspectives so that they can maybe make the difference in being informed of all the sides, not just the anti-gun with millions of dollars of press and pushing their messages.
Yeah, I've talked about it before. I know some people are probably eye rolling there. He's like, there he goes again, talking about the Aspen Institute of Health, right? But I tell that story because it's important. I'm going to repeat it again because we always have new listeners. When I got invited to the Aspen Institute of Health, they were super concerned with my feelings. They thought, we need to warn this guy that this is not the crowd that likes guns. So much that there was like 8 different people pulled me aside to like privately tell me, okay, like, just so you know, like, I hope you have thick skin, da 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 da. And I remember thinking it's going to be okay, right? Like this, I'm actually more comfortable speaking in front of these people than I am sometimes my own people, because my own people, they got quick triggers sometimes. Like they hear guns and mental health and they're like, leave it alone, right? But when the topic of red flag laws came up, and to the right of me was the 2 other panelists, who were very pro red flag law. When it came to me, I remember looking at the crowd, and I'd already won the crowd over. I knew there was nobody in there that was going to throw tomatoes at me or whatever like that. Like I could just tell by the way that they were leaning in and listening and nodding. And every time I said something, I made sure that I was giving a solution or kind of making a point. But I remember I said, I live in a different world than these 2 do. I live in a world where red flag laws get people killed. And I explained myself. I said, I know, that's a weird thing to hear. But I said, if I had $1 for every time somebody contacted Walk the Talk America and said, I'm not going to get help, or I'm afraid to get help because of the red flag law in my state, I wouldn't have to ask you for money. And I remember the way I ended it, it was like kind of like saying, like, how many people didn't call me? How many people don't call? How many people just don't go get help, right? Like we can't even measure that. Jake has a way of measuring it through some data that came out of New York, and I'm not going to butcher how he presents it, right? But he presents it in such a manner that you get it. But it was amazing, like walking around that campus the next 2 days and attending all those events and having people stop me. Like so many people stopped me and said, hey, I saw you speak the other night about the red flag law thing, and you gave me something to think about. And I had some people that literally said, I'm still very anti-gun, but I'd never thought about it that way. I never thought about the unintentional consequences. And that shows you the importance of it. It's like I said, if we don't get out of the echo chamber, it's easy to talk to the echo chamber. It's easy to champion for money for the echo chamber, because the echo chamber is going to understand what you're trying to do for the most part instantly. It's going outside and saying, okay, how do I get these people to hear what I'm saying and think about it and see that it's problematic? And that right there, that story, and I'm going to tell it again and again and again, right, is so important. I got nothing but love after I did that. I got nothing but love. Not one person came up to me and said, you're out of your mind. Red flag laws are still great. All of the feedback I was getting was, I never thought about it. I remember one guy said, I always just thought you people wanted to arm everybody. I'm like, no, but we look at these silly laws, this feel-good legislation, and we look at how it could hurt somebody, because that's what we are in this community. Like we're protectors by nature. Like that's the whole point. We protect our families, we protect our neighborhoods, we protect our communities. But yeah, that's always going to stick with me, and I think it's important.
Yeah, that was the exact kind of moment I was talking about with red flag laws, where the healthcare and pro supporters of red flag laws put in that perfect frame light of the perfect scenario of they knew somebody was going to cause harm and they stopped it. What an amazing thing. And everybody's all supportive. And then you come with that and provide that counterpoint. And it would have been so easy for them not to have you at that discussion, for them to only put out what they wanted to say. But props to them, they had you for that counterpoint and that insight, and that was really valuable.
Yeah, it's continued since then. There's been quite a few people that have reached out to me to help me with their project or whatever advice they want from me, or to pick my brain about something from, that festival. So it's important to keep talking. One of the things I want to bring up, and I think about, you say it's like presented in the perfect light to tug on heartstrings or make you think about something. And I think about the John Hopkins videos. I remember coming across those the very first time I saw those, and I sent them over to Jake. And this is years ago. And I remember Jake like basically saying, "I just fell out of my chair. Like, I can't believe that they're playing these cartoons in these scenarios and they're doing everything wrong when it comes to counseling and helping someone recover out of crisis or something like that." And it's just like, that's the stuff that continues to get put out there. That's the stuff that the anti-gun side is going to continue to put out there and has the money to put out there. Whereas, like, you're never going to see, or maybe one day you will, a cartoon where it's two guys and the guy says like, "Hey, I'm not doing so well. The wife just left." And the guy says, "Well, hey man, let's go to the range. Like, let's go shoot. Let's take your mind off of it." Right? Like, why can't we make cartoons like that? Why can't we put money into making people see the other side of it? When people think of going to the range now because of the movie, the American Sniper movie, I think people see that as a negative. Like, can't be out on the range because, one incident, when you look at that scenario, one incident gave PTSD a really bad name, especially applying it to like our service members, right? And one bad incident on a range where someone who obviously needed help a long time before that day and somehow didn't get it, has kind of stained the whole like lead therapy thing, right? Like, the average person thinks like, oh, if you're not in a good space mentally, you need to be away from the range. And that is just not true. We know that's just not true. So I would love to see money come from somewhere. I don't want the money to come from the government. I really don't. But it should really come from us, right? The gun industry should be the ones funding this stuff, and we have the money to do it. I just don't think that we need to recondition our brains to understand the importance of that, to understand the importance of being philanthropic and supporting the organizations that are doing great work. And once again, if you're not supporting Walk the Talk America, there are so many organizations out there inside the gun community that I'd love to see support. And we had this conversation yesterday. He said, if I had the opportunity to get $1,000, I know exactly who I'm giving it to, right? Like, we do support Kids to Kings. We do support people that do stuff for us in the industry. And we are supportive of other organizations that do great work. So it's just like, pick one and support it, whether that's Sarah from Hold My Guns, whether it's Derek from Kids to Kings, whether it's Devin, whether it's Maj from Black Guns Matter, right? Like, support those organizations because they're out there doing that work for us. And the more we shift to, hey, like, it'd be great to see the government pay for this stuff, it's more involvement from them, right? I'm a big believer in let's do it all ourselves because we can do it. But we'll see. I mean, I think we're getting better. I want to see more effort, and I want to see more people understanding the importance that fighting for your 2A rights isn't just going to the courthouse or the Capitol building and shouting pride from my cold dead hands and banking on all these great organizations out there that have the lawyers that are filing the lawsuits. We got to attack it from all different levels. We have to attack it from the philanthropic level. We have to, the way I move is a lot quieter than, say, some of the 2A organizations that are out there on the Hill fighting, right? But I'm kind of doing the low key, change hearts and minds, like through bridging gaps. It's a different approach, but I need that staunch, like, probably from my cold dead hands guy. I need that guy out there fighting. Like, we definitely don't want to back away from that. We just got to get better at the other areas, providing the solutions, showing people what we do. I mean, if you look at the back of the WTTA Arms Corps card, I love what Arms Corps did with our card, right? So they put the card in a box. They put the card on some of the boxes of their ammo, right? Like, but on the back of the Arms Corps box, if you look at it, it says the best kept secret that the gun industry does, and it's about conservation. So they not only did the front side, which was the WTTA resources for mental health, take the screenings, but on the back side, they talked about some of the other stuff that they do, to help conservation. Like, that's brilliant to me, because no one's going to write an article about that. Like, and if we do write it, it's going to stay in the echo chamber, right? Like, we get it. Fox News, CNN, they're not going to do pieces on this stuff. So it's more important that we have boots on the ground and we're out there talking. That's what's important.
Yeah, and you and I have seen where maybe potential funding coming to an organization mandates that some things are said. I have to be vague because we have to protect who kind of told us the behind the scenes conversation. But there was a statement on the website, and you and I were like, well, why is that there? And like, we tried to tell them, but the funders really wanted that to be really prevalent, even though we kind of tried to educate them why that would be not the best way to go. So sometimes there's organizations that have good intentions, but then the funders or government, wherever that money came from, I forget, said, no, this statement needs to be prevalent and this stance needs to be made. So that's a great kind of counterpoint to why maybe not always coming for government or certain things, and why the gun industry should take stances of their own. And an ad campaign just came full done in my head. I don't know if you guys saw the soccer or football one where there's two soccer fans going to, I believe, an England club game, and there's two guys, and the guy's, oh, how's it going? How's it going? And you're thinking it's going to be the guy that's quiet and doesn't answer, something happened to him, but it's really the guy that kept checking in, like he wanted that question asked to himself. How easy would that be of somebody, hey, let's go to the range, and then, all right, not the first day he opens up, not the second day, but then maybe the third or fourth day, oh, you talk about some things that are really weighing on the person and they didn't feel like they had somebody to talk to, but that going to the range and that process, that led therapy led to that outcome.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That when that came out, so many people had sent me that, and I remember the first couple of people that sent me, I was doing something, I didn't have time to watch it, and even that threw, when I finally sat down to watch it, because I was like, I gotta watch this. I've had more than one person send it to me, and I watched it, and it was when the happy-go-lucky guy who was hugging his friend, who was smiling all the time, who was shaking him like, every time the team scored, is the guy who actually did something horrific to himself, right? Like, it was a plot twist that I wasn't expecting. So yeah, I think more videos like that could help. I go back, I think about one of the most powerful videos that I ever saw, which there's a counter video to that, right? Is the one that I think it was like Every Town Givers, one of the usual suspects put together a video where these kids are like in school and they're running and they're kind of giving advertisements. Like, he's like, this is my bulletproof backpack, right? Like, and then the girl's like in the bathroom texting her mom, like, I love you, da da da. Amazing, like, horrid that they did that, right? Like, it did not make me feel good. But when I saw it, I was like, that's brilliant. Like, what they did was pretty low, but it was brilliant. Just a tug on heartstrings, because any parent that's watching that, that's showing you your worst nightmare, right? That's showing you the Kevin Reichert's like, hey, my daughters are in a closet in Parkland right now, hiding, texting me, right? Like, and the anti-gun side took that and they said, we're going to show people that, and we're going to make people think that that's happening all the time, right? Like, once again, not doing anything to really bring down the mass number, but taking this and saying, like, we're going to build this up really big. It was a brilliant marketing move. It was disgusting, but it was effective. And I had a lot of people send me that. A lot of non-gun people send me that. Hey, did you see this? You know, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? We can do those same type of videos. We don't have to do it like that, but we can do more things that show the positive light of firearms ownership and what it means to us. And, you know, thinking about the lead therapy video, that would be a perfect way to start, because I don't think a lot of people do it on purpose, but I don't think they really understand how therapeutic shooting can be. Because I've had people ask me, like, why would I want to go shooting if I'm not in a good headspace? And I'm like, when you're out there and you're concentrating on that, and it's for me, when I was a kid, it was playing sports. You know, if I had my little heart broken at that age, right? Like, the best way for me to not think of whatever was going on in my life was to actually play in a pickup basketball game or football game or something, you know, or whether I had a game for high school. When you're out there, you don't have time to think about anything else, especially when you play a sport like football, because you can really get hurt if you're not paying attention, right? So to me, when you're out there and you're trying to focus, you know, downrange, and you're trying to get a good grouping, and you're not thinking, and you're breathing, and you're calm, and you're trying to center yourself, that's amazing, right? Everybody right now that's listening to this is nodding. They know exactly what I'm talking about, but a lot of people don't understand that it can be therapeutic, and it's great, and it's empowering, man. Like, you know, look at the kids. I'm going to go back to the Kids to Kings thing, the event that we just helped them with in Atlanta. When those kids are holding assault pistols and concentrating, and you see Devin leaning over and teaching them proper form and everything, you're empowering those kids. And those kids aren't thinking at that moment about how shitty life can be, right? Like, they're not. They're like, somebody's paying attention to me. Somebody believes in me. Somebody is empowering me with knowledge. They're not thinking about their horrible life. Like, you know that, right? They're in that moment. And they're excited, and you know, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's a good relation. I have the same kind of thing with sports, and mine was baseball, not football. Still had to pay attention. As a line drive coming at you at third would lead to bad things if you weren't paying attention. But getting in that zone where you're just reacting and playing something that's second nature is so nice, to forget about all the stresses of the world, whether you're actually going through something or it's just the average troubles of your everyday. Shooting on the range is kind of the same. I don't know if it's kind of the ear protection you have on that kind of lets you block out stuff with your hearing, and you're just focusing on what you're trying to do that day. But it's nice.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to bring up too, because we've been talking about legislation, positive legislation, whether we think it's positive, you know, we're throwing out ideas, right? We're having a conversation about it. But one of the things I think Jake would bring up if he was here, and this kind of steps outside of actual guns, but we're talking about mental health, right? And one of the things I've always heard him say in the past is he would love to see more legislation that allowed people to go get mental health help and have insurance pay for that before there's an issue, right? You think about the physicals, the annual exams that people go do, the screenings for colon cancer, prostate cancer, those type of things that insurance covers as preventative. We also should have that for up here, right? And I know some states may be moving towards that. I heard Kaiser out of California is doing some stuff, and maybe we're getting there. But that is one thing that I think needs to be universal. You know what I mean? So it's one of those ideas that I absolutely love. And whether you love guns or hate guns, you should be able to get behind that, right? Like, imagine if every town and Moms Demand Action got behind mental health preventative care, and making that a standard thing that everybody knows about and everybody could tap into and utilize if they have insurance. Things like that.
It makes so much sense, because as an athlete, I know I spent a ton of time just injury prevention. I was a pitcher, so a lot of time trying to make sure my arm didn't get hurt for the strain that I was going to be putting on it. Why wouldn't we put that same kind of focus on preventative mental health, especially for first responders, things that we know that their mental health is going to have an added strain versus the average human being? It just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is something I would love to see. I'm so happy that the culture of just America is now more in tune to mental health and the issues people are facing. Right now, I get it. Sometimes we've swung way too far. People use their mental health as now a crutch, but that's going to happen regardless. Like that's going to happen anyways. But just the fact that especially when I started Walk Talk America, I felt like I was able to catch a wave. I feel like I got there right before it became like a super popular thing. You know what I mean? And then it took off because I had a lot of gun people being like, "Yeah, I've been seeing that in the news lately. Like people be more focused on mental health and mental health issues and things like that." So it's been cool to see that. But that is one I would love to see. Like I said, accessibility to resources. I truly think that and I know we're up against time here. We're about to wrap up, but I believe that this industry, and I believe this in my heart of hearts, could be the leaders of this space, right? We could be on the forefront of being able to provide. We could do it better than the alcohol industry did with DUIs. Like we really can. And here's the cool thing about it is like we can do it ourselves. Like this is not something that we need everybody else for. And right now, when I look at everybody else, I look at what they do and I'm like, okay, how could we adopt that and make that our own? Right. Because we do have our own clinicians. We do have the Jake Wiskersons, right? We do have the Brandon Coveys. We do have the DB Palmers. We have the Eddie Davenports. There's a lot of shooters that are also therapists. We just got to get them to feel comfortable coming forward and wearing it like a badge because historically, many people don't want to talk about their love for guns because they just don't want the crap that comes with it or they don't want to be looked at side eye, right? And we could change that. We really could. I looked at what Kevin did making responsible gun ownership cool. Like that's something that just stuck with me the last couple days, the way he did it. And once again, I'm going to encourage everybody to check out the clips that are coming out from the Kids to Kings Walk Talk America event that was just happened. No Other Choice Training, Kevin Dixie. The way that he was talking to these kids was absolutely amazing. I'll butcher these stories, but if you watch it and you watch the way that he shows these kids respect and he makes responsible gun ownership cool, just like we need to make mental health cool, right? Like we need to find ways where people are just like, okay, this is cool to talk about. Like it's all good. I think we need to work towards that. And on that note, I think it's time that we wrap this up. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts you want to throw in there, Kevin.
Yeah, I think my closing thought is in marketing, I'll advise businesses when there's maybe a negative comment or something that happened that was real. Maybe it's a restaurant and they had a burnt cheeseburger or something or stuff like that. And they're hesitant to respond and maybe would prefer to be in the back. I push them to voice their message because if they're not voicing their message and maybe their side of the story, then all of the public gets to run and twist it however they want. And that could be said for the firearms industry of we have a lot of positive kind of legislation solutions that could probably save lives. I mean, probably is probably a terrible understatement. We know it could save lives, like you said, if Kevin Dixie or Derek got in front of some of these instances with negligent firearm use or something like that. So let's be vocal about it and get these messages out that make sense to a lot of people in the middle.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I want to add too, since we're talking about guys like Derek, Derek LeBlanc is one of those guys that does the work with the kids, has his regular job, and actually shows up at the Capitol and shows up in a lot of these meetings with these coalitions for suicide prevention to help. Like Derek is out there doing it. So when you make a donation to kids safe, you're not just donating to the work that he does. You're also donating to his ability to get to the Capitol, his time for him to be able to get on these phone calls. And some of these phone calls are 2 hours long. I know because I do it all the time. Like, it's one of the things that with the WTTA board members, we built into the salary that I take, right? There's a part of it that is, you are the guy who goes and sits in these meetings and doesn't say no to the suicide prevention coalitions and gives them an hour of your time. Like, that's part of my job description. But a guy like Derek, who, I think Derek, for the most part, is a one-man show. He's doing this because he loves it and it's the right thing to do. And when you make a donation to Kids Safe, or when you make a donation to Kids to Kings, you're all, these are guys that show up. Devin Perkins showed up at the Capitol to fight some of this goofy legislation that came down in Colorado, right? It was almost like having a firsthand reporter there, right? Like, he was texting us, but Devin had to take time to go do that. And time is some of the most valuable stuff that we all have. And I think people need to appreciate the fact that when you see these people out there on their social media and they're out there doing it, they're not getting paid to do it. So that donation also helps them with the ability to be able to do it, right? Like, if he can't get off of work, or he doesn't have the money to fund himself with the gas and all the expenses that come with going out there and fighting the good fight, it's not going to happen. No one else is going to do it. So just know that some of these donations that you're giving go to some really great things, but it also goes to the ability of this person to, like, be on the front lines and fight.
And
Let's
not
keep that
only
in
them,
mind.
yourself. I know however many years ago, I'd be doing a call to try to get something done. You're like, hey, I'm driving Uber. I got to make ends meet. We want you active and being able to put 100% of your focus on Walk the Talk, not, oh, I need to go drive Ubers today to make ends meet, and you're distracted.
Yeah, man. It's I'll never regret that time of my life, right? Driving Uber put so many things in perspective for me, but that was tough. That was tough for me because of my ego too, right? Like, my ego, like, I always, this could be its own show, but I always laugh because I would get people in the Uber and, they would make small talk with me. And so many times people wanted to ask about, like, why I was driving Uber. And, they always start off really sweet, nice. It's like, do you enjoy what you do? Like, do you like driving Uber? And I always wanted to turn around and be like, no, I'm going to kill my high school guidance counselor. No, but like, I would basically say, well, I do this because, and I would talk about Walk Talk America. And almost every time when I would tell them about Walk to Talk America, whether they like guns or hated guns or whatever, they were like, that's really cool, man. I really hope it works out for you. I really hope it does. And it's one of those things where it's like, I had these little cheerleaders back there, but they didn't understand where I came from. You know what I mean? They didn't understand the sacrifice that I was doing. And like I said, there's nothing wrong. Anybody that drives Uber, I just want you to understand, like, I'm not saying that's a negative thing, right? But Uber is one of those things that only helps you tread water and maintain. It's a good side hustle if you have another plan, right? Nobody is literally going to get rich from driving Uber. No one's going to be able to climb up driving Uber. It's not going to happen. Uber is a great thing to do where you can fill in your time. You can drive at 3 a.m. if you want. Like, there were many nights where my head was spinning and getting out and driving was perfect for me. But, that was a sacrifice I had to make. I didn't want to give up on this. And I knew that if I went and got another job, going back to your point, Kevin, I couldn't do Walk the Talk America. No one was going to hire me and say, hey, dude, you could split half your time. A lot of the stuff that happens with Walk to Talk America happens during the day, right? Because the 9 to 5 thing. No one's going to be like, yeah, it's great that you work for us and it's really awesome that you spend 80% of your time on Walk Talk America. So I knew that if I didn't do that, I was going to have to abandon this. And this, it always pulls me back in. When I get frustrated, it always pulls me back in. But on that note, I want to thank everybody that came to the show today. I know we've been playing kind of musical co-hosts and things like that when we're trying out different things. Thank you for bearing with us. You're going to see different faces. I think that's going to make it fresh and new. And I like this new format. But thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I want to thank all of our sponsors. Obviously, you know, for those of you listening to the podcast, you've heard some of these commercials, but get out there and support these companies. These companies, I can't say enough about them. When you start something like this, you're like, here he goes again. He's trying to wrap up. No, but when you start something like this, and in the beginning, it was really easy because I was self-funding, right? But I'm still blown away by the generosity of some of these companies getting behind what I do. And I'm like a puppy dog. Like when someone says, I want to give you a check, right? I really want them to understand. Like so many times I'm trying to tell them all the great things. They're like, I know, we know. Like, that's cool. Like, I don't have, I just want to give you a check and move on, right? And it still blows my mind to this day that people support this vision. It really does, because it's hard to depart with your money. It really is. Like, you need to trust where it's going. And I just can't thank our sponsors enough. So any of the sponsors that you see there, if you have a gun shop, right, you need to buy from Lipsy's and you need to buy from Davidson's. You know, go get a Ruger, go get an Arms Corps, go get a Bursa, go, like all these people that get behind us. Like when you buy their product because they do the right thing, that helps us. And they really do want to help. They really do. And it's very unique to find companies that actually care about their customers. Most of them just want to do a transactional thing. And are you happy with it? But these people are going above and beyond that. So I want to thank all the sponsors today. Thank you for making this possible. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Everybody that's listening, thank you very much.